episode number 65. My name is Jay Oza. I'm a writer, speaker, and an executive coach. In this episode, I have the honor to talk to Aaron Beverly. Aaron is the 2019 Toastmasters World Champion of Public Speaking. That's a big deal. He had to beat out 32,000 accomplished speakers. Just getting to the final is an outstanding achievement, but to win it is just amazing. And before you watch this show, I recommend you watch two of his speeches. One where he finished first runner up, that was in 2016. And the other one is where he actually won it. That was the one in 2019. So you'll get an idea what an outstanding speaker Aaron is. So we start out the show talking about his speaking journey, joining Toastmasters, and how he became a better speaker through competition. Then we touch upon what each of us can do to become an effective speaker. And then we talk about what are some of the things we can do at work, since most of us are going to give speeches at work, short, long, and he talks about that. There's a lot here in this episode. So enjoy the show. And if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, or even criticism, let me know. Now to the show. All right, let's get on with the show. So today, I am really honored and privileged to have Aaron Beverly on the show. Aaron is a 2019 Toastmasters World Champion of Public Speaking, and that's a tremendous achievement. So I'm really honored to have him on the show so we can talk about Toastmasters, about how he can help us with some of the things that he does become a better speaker. So Aaron, thank you for coming on the show. And get started, kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and especially your speaking journey that got you to become this the 2019 Toastmasters World Champion of Public Speaking.
Yeah, no problem. Firstly, thanks for having me, Jay. I first got started with public speaking when I was a kid. I got started the same way a lot of kids get started with anything that they do, the dictatorship of a parent. In this instance, the parent was my mother, and she said that she wanted me to go up and read a passage from the Bible in front of our entire church congregation. At the time, I was 7, and I was deathly afraid. I didn't know why, but my body was shaking all on its own. My heart was beating 1,000,000 miles per second. But that was my first introduction into public speaking, and I absolutely hated it. Over the years, I kept falling into situations where I had to speak, and my mom basically said that I had to do it. So I didn't really have a good relationship with public speaking. It wasn't until I got to college where I figured out exactly why I even feared public speaking, why I hated it so much. And it was because I was afraid of being embarrassed. I realized my fear in the moment when I attended a student leadership program. And at the end of that program, there was a graduation of sorts. Every graduate had a task in the final ceremony. My task was to give a gift to the keynote speaker. I just had to say a few words, thank him for his time, give him the gift, and sit down. I get up there on that day, I shake his hand, and I say nothing. I go completely blank. It was about 15 seconds of the most awkward silence ever until I just gave him the gift and sat down. But that's where I realized what my fear was. And luckily for me, the person who started that leadership program at my college and the person who was miraculously there as a faculty member at my college, which was really small. Most people never heard of it. It's called Central Pennsylvania College. But a faculty member that was there was by the name of Dilip Abeysekera, who was the 2005-2006 president of Toastmasters International. He was the one who introduced me to Toastmasters. And that is when I learned about the organization. I joined in 2009. And I was really inspired to join after seeing Barack Obama on the campaign trail. I saw his ability to speak and to motivate people. I remembered my mentor, Dilip Abeysekera. I saw his ability to speak and how he spoke so eloquently. I wanted to have that ability. I joined in 2009 and I haven't looked back since.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, that what you went through is kind of what I went through when right after I joined this company called Bell and Howell, and like month into the job, my boss comes to me and says, "Jay, you're going to be giving the status report, the engineering status report to the leadership team." So I put it all together, and my name gets announced in that meeting, and nothing comes out of my mouth. Nothing, absolutely blanked out. Luckily, my colleague Chris was sitting next to me. He took it and he basically gave the engineering status report.
Oh, wow.
And afterward, he said, "Jay, you did a great job with that status report." And I never talked about it with anybody. And I never even went and saw my manager afterwards about what happened. And I just kind of left it at that. And I said, "This is something I don't ever want to be in this position again. I'm just going to avoid it altogether."
Yeah.
And I did. I did. As I mentioned, that I avoided it for like 10 years till I actually joined Toastmasters. Kind of similar to your story. But in yours, I think you were in front of a stage with a lot of people. So that must have been something. Mine was
Yeah.
just the leadership thing. The thing that came out of it, I didn't get fired because I was a good coder. But the bad news was that I was not going to get promoted either because I could not
Hmm.
give a speech. So,
Yeah.
so that's great. So you've been in Toastmasters since 2009. When did you decide that you wanted to enter contest, and why did you? Is it just to develop as a speaker, sort of that so there's a challenge that you have? Can you kind of go over that?
Yeah, sure. I originally started to compete in 2012. I was really inspired to compete in the international speech contest from a former competitor, a former second place winner of the international speech contest. His name is Kwang Yu Yang. I remember seeing his speech on YouTube and I absolutely loved his style. And I said, I want to be on that stage. It just so happens, too, that my mentor, Dilababe Sekura, was also a second place winner back in 1992. I was really intrigued by the contest and I wanted to participate in it. Of course, when I participated for the first time, I had a lot of the dreams and aspirations that a lot of people who enter the contest originally have. I want to be the world champion just because I want to win. I know that I can do it. I'm going to be rich because of it. I'm going to become a millionaire. All of the dreams of grandeur. But I quickly found out that it was going to be a lot harder than I anticipated. The International Speech Contest is a contest of 6 rounds that ultimately lead up to the World Championship of Public Speaking and crowns the World Champion of Public Speaking. I made it out of the first round, which is at the club level. And I only believe I made it out of the club round because I was the only one who participated. The next round, I came in second at the area level contest. So this was only round 2. And I was expecting to be the world champion of public speaking in 2012. So I originally didn't know why I lost. I was mad at the world, but there was somebody who came up to me afterwards and he told me that I needed to work on my storytelling. I needed to work on my speech development. I came in the door with, I guess, what people could say is talent, where I could get up and give a very good speech, but it was an empty speech. There wasn't any substance to it. I then realized that I came into the door with a person who had been a second place winner in the World Championship of Public Speaking. He had been the president of Toastmasters International, and never once at that time had I asked him for help. So I went back to Dilababe Sekura, and he became my first and only mentor and speech coach.
Mhm.
And after that, he taught me the fundamentals of public speaking. And I went from not getting out of the second round in 2012 to making it to the semifinals in 2013. And that was just from learning the fundamentals of storytelling and public speaking.
Excellent. And then in 2016, you got all the way to the finals, and you were the first runner-up, which is a tremendous accomplishment by itself. But you didn't stop there. why did you continue and compete to eventually become the world champion? And is this it now? Can you enter again, or now this once you become a world champion, that's it? You cannot enter
No,
this
once
contest.
you win the World Championship of Public Speaking, you can never compete again. You are forever ineligible to
Oh,
compete in
okay.
international speech contest ever again.
Right, right. I thought once you made it to the finals, that was it, but evidently that's not the case.
Oh no, if that was the case, then I would have been very upset.
So what made you decide after you became a first runner up, like I'm not, there is still that one position I did get, I didn't become the world champion. What made you persevere in saying I got to compete again to become the world champion?
Well, there was a big part of it that was just, it was a dream. I wanted to be the world champion of public speaking. I had a skill that I had honed and crafted over the years. I had become better and better. And I wanted to realize that at the top of the Toastmasters speaking world, which is the World Championship of Public Speaking. So there was the dream side of it. But in 2016, I wasn't necessarily happy with my performance. I left the stage feeling that I didn't give it my best. I didn't execute the speech the way that I knew it could be executed. And that really made me want to get back on the stage, not to win, but to do better than I did the last time. And that was my goal in 2017, 2018, and 2019, to do better than I did in 2016. And it just so happened that in 2019, I made it to the finals again. And it was as if the universe was aligning itself to me, because the 2016 stage and the 2019 stage are identical stages. It was the same exact stage. It was the same exact setup. And it was as if the universe was telling me, Aaron, I'm giving you one last shot to get it right. You better get it right this time.
And it worked.
And luckily, I got it right.
Now, when you say same stage, means the same location or?
No, the same stage setup.
Oh, the same stage, the way they set the stage up. Okay, I didn't know there was that they actually set up a stage like that.
Yeah, they set up the stage, and it's different depending on the venue that we're in. But 2016 and 2019 were identical.
Right. Uh, in the video, they don't show the audience. How many people usually you were giving that speech in front of?
Generally, in the World Championship of Public Speaking, it's about 2,000 people.
Okay, 2,000.
This one, I believe it was a little less than 2,000, because there are a lot of people who are wanting to go to next year's Toastmasters convention, which is going to be in Paris.
Oh, okay. Where was this one where you won the
This
World
one was in Denver.
Oh, Denver. Okay. And in 2016?
2016 was Washington, D.C.
Oh, DC. Okay, so they rotate between US and abroad. Is that what they do? Okay, great.
Well, it's actually, Toastmasters has only had the international speech contest in 3 countries so far. It's been predominantly in the United States, because that's where Toastmasters was created. Then a few times it's been in Canada. And then the only one other time it's been outside of North America has been when it was in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia.
Malaysia. Okay. Okay. Excellent. Yeah. So when you the one that you won the world champion, when you went through the 6 rounds, are these 6 different speeches, or these are the same speech you're giving in each round? Sort of like, when a figure skater is competing, it's the same program, but she has to nail all the jumps and all that. Is that what's happening here? Or these are totally, you cannot use one speech that you gave in the first round in the second, any other future rounds? How does that work?
At minimum, you need at least 2 speeches in the international speech contest. You can use the same speech from round 1 to round 5. But once you get to round 6, that has to be a brand new speech.
So you had 2 speeches that you gave for this round. Okay.
Correct.
I'd like to see what the other speech was.
It's actually on YouTube. You can find it on the semifinals.
Semifinals? Yeah, right. The comment I have on that 2016 speech that you gave, you said that you were not happy with it. I mean, I viewed it and I thought that was an outstanding speech. So is it the topic that you were not happy with, or it's just the way you delivered it, not hitting all the points that would have made you win the contest? What exactly, can you kind of speak to that? What exactly are you referring to when you said you were not happy uh, with your performance there?
Yep, it was definitely with the execution.
Okay.
And with that being said, I have no clue whether that would have changed anything with the ruling of what the judges came out with. I could have given that speech perfectly, and Darren Tate would still be the world champion of public speaking. The biggest key for me is knowing that I did my best. That was going to make me lose or sleep soundly for the next 3 years. And I didn't leave the stage thinking that I gave it everything I had, that I did it exactly the way that I had practiced and wanted. So that's what really motivated me to keep getting better as a speaker, using the contest to do so, and executing better and better on stage until I got to 2019, where I executed it exactly the way I wanted to.
Right.
Even though I fumbled a couple times in 2019, I just powered through. Where in 2016, I started worrying about the judges, which caused me to take my mind to somewhere where it shouldn't have been. And all of a sudden, I couldn't focus on the message that I intended to give.
Right. And when you gave the speech in 2019 in the finals, did you, after you were finished, did you think that's the best you could do, or there were still things you felt like, oh my God, I could have done this a little better? What
For
was
the
your
most
feeling
part,
like?
for the most part, I felt comfortable with the performance. I do believe that I did the best that I could at that time. Now, I did think that I missed over one part of my speech, which I wasn't too happy about. But then I looked at the recording and realized that I must have blacked out because I hit every single line perfectly.
Right.
But in retrospect, there was nothing more that I could have done for that speech.
Excellent. Yeah. Uh, how much did you prepare, just so that people who watch this will get an idea? Because to give that kind of speech, and I think it was about between 7 to 8 minutes, I believe, around that
5 to
time,
7.
that means you really had to be on, because 7 to 8 minutes to convey that story and then the message at the end. How much preparation did you put into this?
Yep. So
And
the speech
the
was
second question that's part of this is, uh, you mentioned something about coaching, that once you had a coach, that's when you started becoming better, at least from a contest point of view, and also as developed better as a speaker. Is coaching, you feel all the people that get to the finals, they really require coaching to compete at that level?
So I'll answer the second one first. And no, I don't.
Okay.
But I do think that you need coaching and guidance to move in the right direction. But afterwards, it's up to you. It's up to you to find your style. I didn't get coached by Dilla Babasekara after 2013. It had been me just using the fundamentals that he taught me and the lessons he taught me and adding on to it with my own style and my own testing of material. And I just built my own style year after year after year. But for the first question with the how long did it take to craft that speech, the speech itself was originally a Facebook post that I posted in June, or not in June of 2018, about August or July of 2018. And that was just my experience at an Indian wedding, where it was just such a crazy experience for me that I wanted to share what I experienced with other people. I noticed the reactions that it got, and it got me to think, maybe I can turn this into a speech. And it's really easy to create a story first draft, but the power comes from the editing process. That's where you find the power. That's where you find the deep message. That's where you find the emotion in the message, where you edit it down to its final version. Originally, that speech or that story could have been about 15 minutes long. And I had to find a way to condense it into 5 to 7 minutes, because the Toastmasters contest, the way it's structured, if you speak for any less than 4 minutes and 30 seconds, or if you speak more than 7 minutes, 30 seconds, you're disqualified.
Right.
So you have a very tight time range to give your message. And you really, as you said, you have to be on. You have to pack a lot in there, and it has to be simple, understandable, yet it has to give the audience something that they can take away.
Right. So when you first started, it must, like I said, probably was like close to 15 minutes. So how long did it take you before you said, okay, and now I got it? And you want to leave some buffer there because when you're speaking, you tend to go over. So what was that like? Like, okay, I got the speech. What I'm asking is like, how many hours did you spend on this speech to get it right?
I honestly can't tell you how many minutes or hours it took because the way that I create my speeches and the way that I edit them, I'm constantly thinking about them. I'm
Yeah.
constantly thinking about ways to improve them. So once I start with a draft, I'm always thinking about how I can make it better. I really believe I sat down and really crafted the first draft of the speech the way that it is given in on stage in 2019. I wrote that draft about July of this year.
Okay.
So took all the material that I had and condensed it down into that one message in July of 2019. But I originally had been testing that material in other speeches and other keynote speeches that I've given in the past, just trying to see what would stick best so that I could take that best content and put it into that 5 to 7 minute time range.
Right, right, right. Uh, After that speech, since you're now basically the world's best guardian of shoes at these Indian weddings, have you been getting a lot of requests from Indians saying, "Hey, Aaron, we need you for the next wedding from the groom side to protect the
No,
shoes"?
no, that's going to be a one-time experience for me. I'm pretty sure.
I said
they,
this could be
they
like
take it
another
very
business on the
seriously.
side. On weekends when you're not working, you might be get called in to Indian weddings. Said, Aaron, you're going to be walking behind the groom. When the shoes come off, you're going to get it since you've done such a great job at protecting the shoes.
Well, I didn't do that great of a job. I did lose them.
Well, you're supposed to. That's the whole idea. You're supposed to. Because my nephew just got married last weekend, and their groomsmen did something pretty clever. They already pre-negotiated it with the bridesmaid. So
Yeah.
they didn't even go after the shoes. They just left it there, and one of the bridesmaids took the shoes, and then they already had pre-negotiated it. So there wasn't much. Because some of these, I've been to some of these weddings, and it can get pretty hot. Okay,
Oh
and
yeah.
it gets so hot to the point you're like, wait a second, this is not the purpose of it. Just play a little bit. I think what you did was it got a little heated. It seems like at your wedding. They didn't
Yeah,
tell
yeah.
you
It got a little crazy.
that Aaron, eventually you resist for a while, and then eventually you let them have it before somebody ends up getting hurt. All right, so that was good. That was, actually is a very good story, especially if you're Indian, you can really relate to it. But I think anybody that's non-Indian really got a good understanding of what you went through. And the way you described it, I haven't seen anybody describe it the way you did in that speech. So well done. That was a great job you did there.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I want to focus a little bit about the kind of speech that you give at Toastmasters contest and the speeches that you give at where you work in the corporate setting. What's different there, and how are you able to? Obviously, you're not giving a story about shoes and all that, and there it's the audience is a lot different. So, what do you change? I mean, I think you kind of addressed it somewhere. I was watching that you focus on the audience. Now, when you're speaking in front of audience in a financial field, they're very much focused on the financial aspect. So
Hmm.
what do you do with your speech when you're talking to that audience versus when you're giving a generic speech like you did at the contest?
Well, the first thing you have to realize is that it's not something that necessarily needs entertainment. So there's not as much entertainment value in it. So you really have to get to the point very quickly. And the way that I've noticed the biggest difference that I've noticed over the years is that you change the order of how you present your stories in a corporate setting. Where in a entertainment setting, you set the scene, then you introduce the characters, then you introduce the conflict, then you have the escalation of the conflict until it reaches the climax, and then you have the resolution. But that's not how it works in a corporate environment. You have to be very quick. And not only that, you have to start with the problem.
Mhm.
What's wrong? That's the biggest thing that senior managers are worried about. What is wrong? How did that happen? How are we going to fix it? That's the order that I normally see in my corporate settings. You start with the issue, you tell them how it got there, and then you tell them the plans that you have that can help rectify the situation. Now, if it's something that happened in the past, you're just going to add, okay, what was the result of putting the plans into action? So that is the biggest difference that I've seen. And you have a much shorter time span to get that message across. And you have to realize that you're not just going to have an attentive audience for the entire time that you're talking. They're going to interrupt. They're going to ask you questions. They're going to wonder different things about what you've just said. And it's not just going to be you having an attentive audience for the amount of time that you speak.
Right. So do you ever get a chance to tell a story, or that usually in a corporate setting, depending on the kind of audience you're talking to, you really don't get a chance to tell a story? It's right, get down to the facts, make your point, and explain why we should pay attention. How does that work? What's your experience like?
So you do still tell a story, but it's a corporate story.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts with what went wrong. Then the story could be about how it went wrong. And you can have a little story about how you're going to fix it. So usually we're introduced to the protagonist, the antagonist, right? Well, in a corporate setting, you have to introduce the antagonist first. And you need to explain the backstory about that antagonist.
Right.
Then you need to bring in the protagonist to be the hero of the situation and rectify the situation. So it's a different order of storytelling,
right,
than how we normally know storytelling, when we have the introduce the character in the setting and then introduce the conflict or the bad guy and then have the escalation. So it doesn't work like that in the corporate setting. It has to be a lot tighter, and you have to start with the problem first, why it exists, and then how you're going to solve it.
Right. Now, you're a highly accomplished speaker. What drives you crazy when you, in a corporate environment where people are giving speeches, whether at work or at conferences? What are some of the things that you would like? You wish they said, I wish they had come to me. I could have told them how they could make their speech so much better. So what are some of the things that you're seeing out there that people are just not doing well?
When they get in front of people and they have no idea what they're talking about.
Okay.
They obviously didn't do their research. They obviously didn't prepare. And it clearly shows that they did not prepare. Then you have others who have filler words.
Mm-hmm.
These are the bane of this is the bane of existence for a lot of Toastmasters around the world, where you have and it's just constant. Every other word seems to be one of these filler words. Sometimes people are so fluid in the way they speak that it's not that big of a problem. But there are others where it's just such a drag on their presentation that it puts you to sleep. I remember one time I was sitting in the audience of a very senior manager at my job, and the presentation was just incredibly boring. I was literally pinching myself just so that I could stay awake. So those are the two that I believe irk me the most, when you don't know what you're talking about because you didn't prepare, and when you are filling your presentation with so many filler words that it becomes a drag on your speech.
Right. Now that you're a world champion, I mean, before that you were a first runner-up, do people at work actually seek your advice on how they can speak more effectively at work? And even have executives at where you work right now reached out to you saying, hey, Aaron, could you help us when we have to give a speech in front of a large audience? What's that been like? So what kind of reaction have you gotten from is it okay to say where you work or not?
So the short answer is some do and the higher ups don't.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, politics are a thing. And I know that for a lot of people, even though you may have a world champion public speaker, if they're still junior to you, you don't feel comfortable going to them. But then there are other people who come up to me and just ask me for advice or ask me for tips, or will sit there for me to evaluate them. And those are the people that I believe have the right mindset of getting better. But obviously you have executives who will pay top dollar for high-end speech coaches. So I guess they feel that they are better off in their hands than mine.
Right, right, right. No, it's interesting because when you have someone like your caliber at a company, they could certainly, because communication is the most important thing, especially the higher up you go. That's all you do most of the time.
Yeah.
And has this helped you? Like, are you planning to take this to the next level? And I mean, are you currently a professional speaker where are you giving professional speeches, or you want to just remain in the Toastmasters sphere and just help out in that space? Can you talk about that?
So I do professional speaking from time to time. Obviously, I have my full-time job, so that takes priority. But I am looking to get into corporate training. That is going to be the next career move that I make. Right now, I'm a project manager at JP Morgan Chase, and I want to take my project management role, change that up a little bit into a training role.
Right, 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 right. No, that's great, great. So let's just talk about uh, public speaking and who do you consider? You already mentioned some of the names, the people that have influenced your public speaking. Who are some of the speakers that you see? You already mentioned, Barack Obama and the coach. I can't pronounce that name, but I know you're talking about at the college that you met. But who are some of the speakers that you see and you're saying, wow, or maybe any YouTube videos that you've seen saying, wow, these people get it. Like, can you name some of those speakers that have influenced you or you look up to so that we get an idea what we
So I
can
don't have
take away?
many professional speakers that come to mind, but I take a lot of inspiration from comedians. And you may even see it in the style that I have on stage, where I have a very quick and punchy delivery. And that comes from my studying of comedians. I really like comedians like Eddie Murphy, one of the newer comedians in recent years, Hassan Minaj,
Mhm.
and old school comedians, Robin Williams. I really look at their content, their presentations, and I see what I can use in my public speaking presentations from watching them. Because I believe that comedians are the greatest example of public speaking in the modern day, even more so than the professional speakers themselves.
Right, right. The one I like, George Carlin. He's one of my
Hmm.
favorites, and Chris Rock. Like
Yeah.
watching. I agree with you. Uh, so the question is, since you watch comedians and you do tend to be humorous when you're speaking, and humor is a kind of a tricky thing. Most people cannot pull it off. So the question is how it's important, but how do you develop humor? If everybody wants to be funny, and most of the time it doesn't go well because one of the challenge you face is, like, let's say you're giving a speech in a corporate environment, they're not expecting humor. And if you
Mhm.
start using humor, the humor is going to stomp over your main message that you want to convey. So how do you balance that? Like when to be humor and like how do you actually rehearse humor, or it's mostly spontaneous? And that can be tricky too. So can you talk about that? Because we always hear two things you always hear about public speakers. You got to tell stories and you got to be funny. And those are not the two of the easiest, they're not that easy to pull off.
Mhm. Now, I would say that as a speaker, you do need to tell stories, whether it's a corporate story or whether it's one of the stories for entertainment value. But you don't always have to be humorous. That is a myth and it is a misconception. The biggest point is to get your message across. That is the number one goal for a speaker. If you get your message across to your audience and you didn't deliver one humorous line, then guess what? You still succeeded as a speaker. However, if you were hilarious and yet nobody in the audience knows what your message was, you failed. So humor is not necessarily a mandatory item that you need to put into your speeches.
Right.
But humor does help connect to your audience if done correctly.
Right.
Now, by incorporating humor, you need to understand that all situations are not appropriate for humor. In the corporate environment, humor has to be taken very lightly there. You cannot put humor in your business, all of your business presentations, the way that you would for a Toastmaster speech, because it's just not going to go well at all. People will think you're not serious. They will think that you don't take your job seriously, and they are going to lose confidence in you if they even allow you to speak for any certain amount of time.
Right.
Now, you can still let your own character shine through, and you could joke and pal around with people before you get to the message. You can be sarcastic, and more so in the Western settings where sarcasm is a little bit more understood. But those are instances where you can incorporate some light humor in a business presentation. However, at the end of the day, you have to know your audience. That's what it ultimately boils down to. And you have to know that just because you can add humor doesn't mean that what you say is going to be humorous to everybody.
Right.
There's no such thing as humor that every single person in the world is going to laugh at. It just doesn't exist.
Sure.
Even for my speech, I scroll the comments of YouTube and I will see occasionally, oh, this isn't funny. Why are people laughing? But then you have that audience there that is just genuinely laughing, because
Right.
I know a Toastmasters audience and I know what makes them laugh. A lot of humor as well comes from testing. Sometimes I think something's funny, so I'll test it on an audience.
Mm-hmm.
They may not find it funny, so I say, okay, maybe I can change the line here to make it more funny, or maybe I just have to scrap it all together. It takes a lot of testing and a lot of building your material before you can give a speech that is constantly humorous. Now, some people are more naturally inclined to humor too.
Right.
I'm not one of them.
Right. Because I think the challenge that a lot of people face is they want to be likable. And they think in order to be likable, they need to say something funny so that the audience will like them. And in the process, they will say something that may not be funny. So now they may not come across that likable. So it's a real tough thing, because we always want the audience to like us, because if they like us, they're going to be more receptive to your message. So that's really a tough thing. I mean, you pulled it off really well in your speeches right from the beginning at the Toastmasters. Another question I have is, you use your voice very effectively. So the question is, have you ever had voice training? And the second is acting. How important is that? Have you had any kind of acting lessons? Because when you see your speech that won you the contest, it's a performance. I mean, it's almost like you're putting on a performance there. And there you had to use all the techniques that a Broadway actor would use on the stage. So can you speak about that? Any voice lessons that if people are watching you right now saying, okay, I want to be like Aaron, what do they have to do? Do they have to go out and take voice lessons? And do they have to go out? I mean, obviously they require some coaching, but what about acting? Because there was a real performance that you put on there.
So I would never tell anybody that you have to do A, B, and C in order to be like me or someone else. Because the one way, we talked about being likable before, the best way for you to be likable is for you to be authentic to yourself. When I'm on stage, that is me being authentic. That is me bringing you an authentic piece of myself. Now, it's polished and it's refined, and it's stretched out in a longer time period than I would usually have that amount of energy and bombasticness, if you will. But at the end of the day, you have to be authentic. So every gesture that I gave on that stage is a gesture that I would normally use in my day-to-day conversations with friends and family. Every voice modulation that I did is something that I naturally do.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that I did, even to the words that I said, was from my everyday interaction with people that I normally have. Nothing was forced. People have this bad connotation with acting, and you ask the question, do you need to take acting lessons? I say, no, you don't need to take acting lessons, but having acting skills can be very useful, I would think. And people have the bad connotation of acting, but I think that acting is not bad. Bad acting is bad.
Mm-hmm. Right, right.
When you have a scenario where you're trying to call upon an emotion after having already experienced it, it's probably years past, but you're calling upon the emotion again to add the effect in your speech. You can still remember that scenario and still garner or still summon that authentic emotion from that time. So it's still authentic, but you're acting. It's why we have acclaimed actors in Hollywood. They make us believe that they're actually in that moment, that they are that character. That's great acting. And then you have other movies and other actors where you just say, like, your acting is absolutely horrible. I'm not transformed. I do not believe that you are this character that you're trying to portray.
Right, right, right.
So it can definitely enhance, but again, I wouldn't say that you absolutely need it. And as far as voice is concerned, I did take singing lessons before, and that's definitely helped me, but it mostly helped me with my breath control and just timing and pacing the way that I use my voice. A lot of people don't like the sound of their voice, but there's very little that you can do to change it outside of doing something chemically or medically to your body. So you really want to control your breathing so that you can make sure that you get enough air that you can project the way that you want and that you can not lose breath and you can say your entire sentence. A lot of people can lose their breath when they're on stage because sometimes their heart is beating a lot faster, so their blood is rushing and all of a sudden they feel out of breath and they don't know why. They're not running on stage or anything, but they just feel out of breath. It's because they just need to practice breath control and using their breath to enhance their voice.
Right, right. Because you have a great voice. I mean, you're just gifted, right? You mentioned Barack Obama. I mean, he has a great voice. Like, you guys can read a phone book and make it sound like, we want to listen to. We're not all gifted like that with that kind of voice. Now, that gives you an advantage. We're almost going to wrap up here. One question that you can, in a corporate, applies to corporate setting, and it has to do with what we do in table topics, right? A lot of times in a corporate setting, you're asked, you're in the audience and somebody will ask you, so Aaron, what do you think about this? Which is sort of like a table topics where you have to now, given maybe minute or so, or 90 seconds, where you have to explain something that you've been asked by your manager or anybody. How do you handle that? Because that is related to tabletops, and that's the kind of speech that most of us are likely to give rather than getting in front of people and giving a speech. How do you handle that when in a corporate setting when you're asked that type of question?
So in the corporate setting, you really need to remember that you're usually being asked certain questions because people think that you have the knowledge to give them a good answer. So you should have the confidence enough that these people believe you know what you're talking about. Now, if you don't know what you're talking about, tell them that. Mm-hmm. Do not try to make something up. Say that I'm not sure, I'll get back to you, or I'm not sure, let me find you someone who does know the answer. That can give you just as much credibility as you having the answer. Now, if you do know the answer and you're just afraid of engaging, you really want to have exposure therapy. It's why Toastmasters includes the section called Table Topics, where you don't know what the topic is going to be, but you have to speak about it for 1 to 2 minutes. The ability to speak impromptu, I believe, is like a muscle. You have to go to the gym and refine it and make it bigger and make it stronger. And once you do it enough, you get used to the situation where you're put in the situation in real life, and all of a sudden your brain clicks and says, okay, I've been in this situation before. Let me piece together this information so that I can give you a proper answer. So it does take practice. Mm-hmm. And again, some people are more naturally inclined to it than others, but everybody can learn it.
Right. You just have to practice that with any topics and just test it yourself. Like if you're asked this, like one of the things I advise people to do is practice it. You'd never want to be in a situation where you're good at thinking on your feet. That all depends on how much you already anticipated the questions that are likely to come up.
Hmm.
Because if you have to think on your feet, I mean, if I have to think on feet on a topic that I'm not familiar with, most likely I wouldn't end up doing a good job. All right, so we're going to wrap up with just two final questions. So besides watching your video of Toastmasters contest speeches, are there any videos like YouTube videos that you recommend that people watch in order to get an idea of what a good, effective speech looks like?
On YouTube and videos, not really sure, because one thing that I've noticed with the public speaking world is that people want to provide public speaking education, but they don't necessarily want to give that to you for free. They want to find a way that they can make money off of it.
Mm-hmm.
It actually ties into one of my missions. I want to bring public speaking educational content that is high in quality to free platforms such as YouTube and LinkedIn. That is something that I'm currently working on. You can look forward to it in the year 2020. It will be on my YouTube channel primarily, and my YouTube channel is by my name, Aaron Beverly. And that is my mission. I want to bring public speaking educational content to the people who want it and need it most. And I'm going to do that in 2020.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I do the same thing. In fact, anytime I'm giving a speech, when I'm giving it for the first time, I'll have a videographer to videotape it. And then I put the whole thing on the YouTube, because the thing I've noticed is going from 0 to 1 is very hard.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody out there, because I had some, one time I hired a coach, and the advice that she gave me was, Jay, you're putting too much of your IP stuff on YouTube. And I'm like, I'd rather err on that, because if somebody can go from 0 to 1, which requires a lot of work, if they can do it on their own, they don't need to ever see me. I
Yep.
can take them from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. That's what I do as a coach. But for 0 to 1 shouldn't cost them anything, because that's all the effort that they're going to have to put in. I can't help them that much if they're not willing to put the effort to go from 0 to 1. So I said all my speeches that I give talks on executive interviewing, what are some of the things you have to do for resume, and all that is free out there. And I said most people are never going to do any of that.
Yeah.
They're just not going to do it. It's all out there. If they do it, then they're going to come and saying, hey, I got to this point, can you take me to that next point? And that's what you're saying, kind of. Any books on public? I think you mentioned you're writing a book, or you already have a book out on public speaking. Or are there any books that you recommend that someone read on public speaking?
So I don't have any books currently. I do plan to write a book in the next year or two. But the books that I would recommend the effective way to public speaking. I'm probably mixing up the title, but it's by Dale Carnegie.
Okay.
And it's my public speaking Bible.
Dale
I
Carnegie's book. Okay.
love that book. And all the principles that people teach today about public speaking, I believe that all of what they're teaching can be tied back to that book.
Excellent. I'll check it out. I may have it, because I pretty much have, just like when I was learning golf, I had all the books on golf, but that never helped me improve my score. But in public speaking, I do read quite a few books that come out. It seems like there are so many books coming out all the time.
Yeah, and I
Aaron, is
believe
there
it's
any?
called The Quick and Easy Way to Effective Speaking.
Oh, okay, okay. And it's by Dale Carnegie. Written by Dale Carnegie, or by Dale Carnegie Organization?
I believe it's Dale Carnegie Organization, because it was published after he passed away.
Okay, great, great, great. So any final tips, techniques that you recommend to somebody who wants to really become an effective? Is there like one golden tip that you have? Because there are so many tips. When you listen to public, you can kind of go crazy. You got to do this, you got to do this, and it just they get overloaded to the point they're saying, this is not for me. Is there one simple tip that you can give our audience that can get them started? And what would
Yep,
that be?
absolutely. And it's one that a lot of people do not like to do, but it will help you tremendously as you grow as a public speaker. And that is simply to record yourself, whether it's audio recording or video recording. Record yourself, but listen to that recording. Watch that recording. See what it is that you do that could be considered a distraction. listen to what could be a grammatical error, get over the fact that you look like that and you sound like that. Get over
Great.
it. That's how you look. That's how you sound.
Great. Great tip. My problem is I do record it, but then I don't do the second part to watch it. And
the recording part is actually easy. It's the second part that's tough.
So now I know what I need to do to get better. I need to do that. Aaron, if somebody wants to get in touch with you with bringing you on as a public speaker, how can they get in touch with you?
Yep. You can reach out to me at aaron@speakandbu.com. That's AARON at speakandbu, SpeakandBeyoU.com.
Okay, great. And I will include all that stuff in the show notes when I put this out. And Aaron, thank you very much for doing this. Again, congratulations for being 2019 Toastmasters World Champion of Public Speaking. It's a tremendous achievement. And we'll look forward to seeing you more, giving more professional types of speeches and seeing you on YouTube. And maybe even one day, if you're in this area, may get to see you personally. And again, thank you and good luck.
Thank you very much, Jay.